We're going to talk tonight about AWS Cloud Formation from basic to auto-scale instances. How many people here have actually used AWS services in any way, shape, means, or forms? It's like a majority of everybody here. How many have actually used Cloud Formation to stand up? Just two so far. How many people are actually in multiple regions at the moment? Two. Maybe kind of in the process and are trying to. So Cloud Formation is a way to create, and this is straight out of Amazon. Well, Cloud Formation is a way, when I rebooted I lost a slide about me. Okay, so my name's Adam, Adam Book. I'm one of the cloud team members, or the cloud team, one of the cloud team leaders here at OpenSpan. I had a little picture, which is my icon. If you want, you can try to find me on LinkedIn, but I don't do Twitter or anything like that, so good luck. So we'll go right back to the presentation here. Cloud Formation, this is straight out of Amazon. Cloud Formation is a way to create and manage a group of AWS resources in a templated fashion. That's kind of dry. Cloud Formation is really one big JSON piece in order that lets you manage resources and then in a recreatable fashion, and then, if you like, move them from region to region. Okay, so they're grid in JSON and they can move from region to region. These are some of what I have in the table here are some of the different, this is sampling of some of the different services that you can put into a JSON template. So you have EC2, EBS, load balancers, elastic IP addresses, auto scaling, security groups, you can create your own VPC, you can use S3 buckets, timeline forms, identity and access management policies, and a whole lot more. And if you got a question on any of this, feel free to stop me. I'm going to do a demo in the middle of all this here in a second. And we'll go to creating your basic template. So the template itself contains 5 sections. The first one is the description. The description is really just for your purposes. So that when you actually, it's just a little note to you to say, this is what this template is. And you'll see that when you actually create the template, it'll say, this template creates an EC2 instance and a load balancer. Parameters can be real important. So at the top of, after you have your description, you can have a parameter section so that then talk to other pieces of the template, such as availability zones, and the parameters can have defaults. So if you always want the resources that you're spinning up to be in, we'll use US East 1 because that's what a lot of people use and it's one of the easiest sections to go into. If you always want your resources to spin up in US East 1 and use availability zone 1A, then you can actually put that into a parameter and then call that parameter later on in the template. I'll actually show you an example of this a little bit later on. But then you realize that US 1A is always getting filled and you can't call resource. So then instead of having to go dig down all the way to the bottom of your template and find out where you're calling that parameter, that item, you can just simply, when you're calling the template in the screen, it'll ask you to fill out your parameter items. You just change that 1A to 1B and then be off and running again. Your mappings at the top, on the next section of the template, you'll actually see a mapping section, and this will be your AMIs that are being used in each zone. So when you use when you create an AMI, whether it be the base AMI of an EC2 Linux or Ubuntu or something you find from the marketplace, or whether it's a custom burnt AMI that you've done, if you want to be able to take this from region to region, you then would have to copy it, make a copy in each other region, and then place it in the mappings. Your resources. This is where you're actually going to create the items that the template is spinning up. So an EC2 instance, a CloudWatch alarm, just a set of IAM policies. The resources section of the template is where you're going to actually describe that. And then your outputs. The outputs is where on the CloudFormation screen, it'll actually give you back some input, some output, like the instance ID of the instance you just created, or the bucket name that you just created, or the URL of the instance that you just created. So here's just a bare bones example, which doesn't spin up anything, but just the basic structure of the JSON template of CloudFormation right here. So if you're going to have your formatted version and the version date. Once again, we have our description right here, and so this can be changed to anything. Amazon's really not checking for this except the validity of the JSON syntax. Your parameters can go in the next section for your keys and values. Your mappings are going to a key and values, resources, and outputs. The next thing I can tell you is don't try to build things from scratch just by reading the documentation. Amazon has a lot of examples for you to take a look at. It's hard enough in trying to build some of these things sometimes, especially once you get to more complex templates. So if you go to amazon.com/CloudFormation and then go to CloudFormation templates, you can see a lot of different examples where they've already done things like created a EC2 instance that connects to a MySQL database, or an auto-scale group. And I actually started the demo right from one of their examples, except for one fact that I changed their Amazon Linux instance to Ubuntu across the board. So with that, I'm going to switch desktops here for a second, and we're going to go right into, we're going to back to the slideshow, but I'm going to go right into the CloudFormation console. So I'm going to make a little side note here, especially if people are watching, because we're recording this and you'll be able to watch this later on YouTube. If the console does not look exactly like this when you watch it later or look at it later, that's not my fault. Amazon is constantly changing the way their items look. Constantly updating. So what's happening right here is, so you want to create a stack. You can create a stack, update a stack, or delete a stack. Since we have no stacks happening at the current moment, all we can do is create a new stack. We're going to take one of just the base stacks, and so we're going to create a new stack. The next thing is we're going to create a stack name. And we're going to use one of the sample templates, but we're going to use our own template, so we're going to choose a file. It then is going to ask for a key name. Oh, I'm sorry. These are the parameters that I was talking about before. So there's parameters in this template. If we actually take a look at the template itself, you know what? It's actually going to be better if. What I'm trying to hear is the difference between the first template and the second templates. And so if we actually look at if we actually look at the template itself, we can see that it has two parameters. It has a key that you need, so you're going to need a key to actually get into the instance that we're creating, and then it's going to allow an SSH location. But the default to the location is going to be any address. it then has the mapping section. So in the mapping section, it's got the same base AMI of a base and virtual instance, but each AMI is different for every single region. We're then going to create our resource of just an EC2 instance and give it a security group. It's then going to reference that key name, which we designate up top, and then it's going to, whatever region we created in, it's then going to find that region inside the region map. So it's going to go say, whatever region we go into, we're creating this in the US West 1, that's where we started that screen at. So it's going to go find where our AMI is in US West 1, and then use that AMI. It then needs a security group to spin up the instance, so it's going to use it, it's going to reference this instance security group, and then create the instance security group here. It's only going to allow, based on the security group, 422 from TCP. At that point in time, it should give an output of the EC2 instance, the availability zone, where it's created at, the public DNS name, and the public IP. These are options. You can tag your stack just so you can keep track of it later on. It'll then just let you review the template, and then we can then create it. So at this point in time, we can see the creation of, and at the bottom, in your status bar, in your events, you can see what's happening. You can then refresh and see if the crate is still in progress. So now our actual item has started creating, and now it's going for the security group. It's starting to be created. Our security group has been and then we're in. So now we have our initial stack, but it doesn't do much at this point in time. So instead of tearing down that stack and creating a whole other stack, what we can do is we can actually update the stack. So if we want to update the stack with some enhancements, like maybe let's see, what did I do in a second? Index page. And then in order to see the index page, we have to change our security group to actually allow port 80. We can then do that. So we'll just change, we'll update the template a little bit, and then add that to the system. Same thing with our parameters. We'll use the same key. We'll still allow from everywhere. Now, this is something in the stack policy. Their stack policy is somewhat like an IAM policy, and if we didn't want to touch a resource, we could either add an allow or deny from all. I'm sorry, I didn't have time to write a demo for the stack policy. And we hit update, and then we can see the update in progress. So now we can see in the events too that it's going to start to update our stack. It's saying update completed. So if we go back to the outputs, they just put the security group. Oh.
Yeah, I'm saying you had only updated the security group so far.
Right, because we would have to, you would have to tear down another instance and then bring up the other one to actually do that on initialize.
I think you'll get the outputs when it finishes.
But we could also change, we could also actually, because the template is available to go across regions, we can actually go to a whole nother region, like Northern Ireland, and spin this whole thing up again. Because it's already tested and available to go. I'm hoping that it's going to be able to, I know I test these things in a couple of different ways, but I'm hoping. The web page I made is not great. I tried to do something with JSON and doing all the common eliminations, and the JSON didn't, it had some kind of weird thing, so now it's like this great thing. It just is like an H2 head page that says, welcome to our demo. Okay, update complete. Let's go back to our outputs. Okay, it looks like the same instance ID and everything. Let's try this one at a time. To go to the URL. And it's not, so I could probably delete the stack and recreate it, because I think it needs to be created from just fresh. Some things will take, I've noticed some things will take updating, some things will not. An instance, just because you're adding a web page to an instance, because you're doing it on the initialize, those scripts have to be placed into the metadata at time of creation. So because you're updating that instance is already running, and so it won't actually take those items.
I think if you were using an auto-scaling group, it might do it.
Well, you have to tear down one and then let another one come up.
No, I'm saying I don't know that that's the case, because I think, if I remember right, if you actually modify the auto-scaling group and the user data, that it will realize it needs to resubmit instances.
That hasn't been my experience with it.
Okay.
You actually have to tear down one and then have the same number of, it'll then say what's my minimum or destination number of instances.
Yeah, you could also tweak down the numbers on that as well as too.
Yeah, it is. So we go for two. Let's go to step 3. I think this is where we go for more parameters. So we've torn down one, and if you said, what did I do on that other template that I was working on, you can see a whole list of completed, failed, deleted, or in progress on your list right here. Because I've had instances, and then actually on this one right here, you can actually see the template. So if we go to deleted over here, we can see the AWS demo we had, and then we can actually see the actual template that we used. Because I've actually had instances where I said, where was that template I was working on last month, and that was, I did have working, and you can go and cut and paste this, and then go re-edit it later on. Just a little trick of, so we're back to creating our instances. This is now at this point in time, we have an EC2 instance that's going through a load balancer that we've added to the template. So we're going to we're still having the same two parameters and the same mappings, but in the EC2 resources, we're actually going to have a load balancer that has a health check to port 80. So we're going to come up, we're going to bring the load balancer up, have the EC2 instance come up, and have it checked to make sure that the target is healthy. With a healthy threshold of 3 checks and a healthy threshold of 5 checks, and checking every 30 seconds. And then in our outputs, we have to bring, now we're going to have a separate security group just for the load balancer than just the instance. And in our outputs, we're going to have the assembly URLs. We're going to have the URL of the load balancer come out so we can check that load balancer. Let's go see how our instance is doing. So it's our load balancer is up. We could actually see here's our load balancer that it just created. It has an instance up, but the instance is still registering at the moment. So even if we went to the website, it still needs to pass enough of those health checks to come online. So if we go back to the outputs, here's our URL. But we want to just check our load balancer. Now it's in service. And there's my awesome web page that I built for this demo. I know. I'm looking for a design job with that thing. So now, what did I do between 3 and 4? Here's 4, and here's 3. Check.
It's like parameterized report.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're going into more parameters. The spot did not work with just a single instance. The spot will work with a auto scale group. I've used spot instances in auto scale groups before. I was trying to show everybody how to. You can go with the spot instance though in a template. When you're going to get a difference between, as you see, these instances will come in about a minute. You're going to have at least a 4-minute differential between actually going out where it has to go out, make the bid, and then bring your instance up. So especially if you're in an instance where you have a need for instances now, remember you're going to have an item where it has to go out and make the bid, and then successfully accept the bid, and then bring those back up into the load balance instance. So know that you're going to have a little bit of delay, especially if you're starting to get hammered. And it'd be auto-scaled in that way. So we should be able to just update from 3 to 4. Oh, and it wants my password again. I was session up for the, so I'm going to,
It happens around the same time.
Okay. For me.
good, so you can not look while I sign in again. Back. Okay, so now we'll go back to with more parameters. We'll see if we can just update the stack again. 3 to 4 and see. Yeah, so that's another thing, because so if you can get if you go into an autoscale group, this is the good thing about your parameters is, because if your spot pricing fails, you can just go back to the parameter template and just update your spot price. And then we've added in the web server port, so, I mean, we're just going on basic data here, but if you want to do security by obscurity, you would just change that to 8080 or 80,000. You can then change, you know, you're basically managing your, because I have all these in the template as defaults now. It already has my key in there, so I don't have to retype that again. You can prioritize a lot of the things in your template, which are nice, and then it just calls other pieces of the template later on. But it takes some work and it takes some initial work, because as you parameterize the different pieces of your template, you have to make sure that you're using the right notation, like uppercase notation, the right items being called lower down in the template. See if I think I talked about that some in the actual presentation. Okay. So, and as you do that stuff, the things get complex. So I would say use some tools. There's 2 good online JSON editors, because as you're editing these things, you're gonna find you're gonna have a curly bracket there, and then all of a sudden, as you upload it to Amazon, it's gonna say, you know, there's a trouble in your template at line 999. Well, that's not where the bracket is at a place. It's actually in your parameters file where it hits, and that's way up at line 152. So you need to find a couple different JSON editors online that can actually help you with some validations. Everybody got that down? For those taking notes? Here's where we're just launching the new template. And creating a stack. We talked about using parameters. And should have been using parameters. Then it came to the launch. Tracking the launch. So we talked about tracking the launch. You can see where the creation in the different items where the items are created and in progress. Every once in a while, you're going to run into some problems. You just view it, the items in the CloudFormation portal, and then you can take your templates that you've done and then modify them, and then updating the templates. Here's what we're talking about. Troubleshooting. When you run into issues, you need to look at why your template failed. So it'll say update, you'll see things like update, rollback, and deletion complete all the way up here. You need to look at this create failed right here. So what it was happening is it was trying to create the load balancer, it was creating progress, but then it says security groups can only be applied to an ELB and a VPC. So then you go back into your ELB block, and you must have tried to put something in a virtual private cloud. It's just telling you right there, it's not allowed. So go back, take out that line, retry your template again. Go ahead.
So I'm not sure if it would catch this particular thing, but if you've got the AWS command line stuff installed, you can actually do CloudFormation validate template. Validate your template before you actually try to create a stack with it, so that can be kind of handy.
That's half and half. I've had success with that.
Yeah. Some things you'll catch, some things it won't until it actually tries to launch it. You know, it's not going to know that the ID of the security group that you're giving it isn't actually a valid ID, but it can at least validate that the structure of your file is right, and that you're not trying to put parameters on things that aren't allowed, that kind of stuff.
I'm with you. Yeah, that's if you're good with the command line tool as well.
I mean, it's
You're right.
It's a pretty simple. It's a one-liner. You know, AWS CloudFormation validate template.
I'm with you. I'm just whether you're using the old tools and it was the CloudFormation toolkit or the new toolkit, and so it's AWS. Is it just CloudFormation or is it CF?
CloudFormation. Well, CF might work as well, but I know for sure cloud formation.
Do /H, do you do /H and you'll get a full, or it'd be cloud dash, I think it's cloud dash formation. Is it cloud dash formation?
I think it's all one word.
I think we're gonna do next month's thing on the actual command, on the new Python toolkit. And so validate your templates. It'll actually parse it through and say whether or not, but it won't catch things like this security group is not, well, it catch things like if you're trying to reference something that's not in the actual template.
I mean, it'll catch some of that stuff. So if you're trying to reference, something that you expect to be in the template, then I think that will fail because it won't have a resource called that in the template. If you're just trying to pass it a like security group ID of an already existing security group, then it probably wouldn't catch that because it's not actually, I don't think it actually validates that that value is a real security group.
Yeah,
So
so
it just
when
depends
you're,
on what you're doing.
when you're making a multi-templated, I've created my VPC, and then I'm creating the, yeah, it doesn't catch that sometimes.
Right.
Yeah.
Doesn't know what he doesn't know.
Right. So use the validate template from the command line, but also it'll a lot of times tell you exactly what it's failing at. Let's go take a look at what our next to final template is happening with. I think our update is complete now. So we should be able to. It's our same demo page. What do we put? Oh, this one was just the updated parameters. So I got one more. Update of the stack. We're going to delete this one and then create a new stack, and then we're going to take a look at this item. And this is where we actually, because since I labeled this of that we were going to do auto scaling, that I said I'll actually show everybody how to do an auto scaling group here. So the first thing that you need is the launch config. And so you start your launch config, and then you go into, I'll show you this and then I'll show you in the comparison. So we've taken out the EC2 line right here because instead of a single EC2 instance, we're going to start with the launch config. Then we go into our properties, and we're still referencing our security group, and then what type of instance. Now that could be a parameter right there. Then we go back into what we're doing in our actual instance, and each time we're installing Apache and then placing our web page on there, and then we're finding our image in the regional map. Then we go into the scaling policy. So we have a scale up policy and a scale down policy. So the scale up policy and the scale down policy really don't tell it how to scale up. It just says it is going to scale up during the cooldown time and what type of adjustment. How many are you going to scale? And right now with this one, we're just saying one. Go up one and then go down one. And then we get into the actual alarms. So now we're using CloudWatch alarms, and we're saying with the CPU, if the CPU is greater than 88% for 10 minutes, so here's our threshold of 88, and our period of 10 minutes, then says alarm action scale up policy. Same thing with the CPU alarm low. So if it's less than 88 for 10 minutes, go back to the scale down policy. So that's what actually triggers those scaling policies. And you can change this from CPU to network bandwidth or other things. I tried network bandwidth, it just all of a sudden it would go haywire. Once again, here's our elastic load balancer. So, and then our security groups, and our outputs changed a little bit because it's tough to actually, all we have is the less deploy bounce URL because we can't call a specific EC2 instance to grab on the autoscale group. Now, in the autoscale group, it also wants to know what availability zones are we using. We're using West right now, and so we had, just so I didn't have to type it in or hard code it in and it was going to be easier to change, I'm going to give it the 2 availability zones.
It's probably worth noting on that spot price, with you doing auto scaling with spot instances, it's not smart enough to say one zone is at, your bid is at 4 cents, one zone is at 5 cents currently, and the other's at 2. It's not smart enough to choose the 2.
No, it's just,
and it's going to block your whole auto scaling group if you use a spot within. So
I don't even have the spot price on the item.
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
You're right.
It's a bug, and they need to fix it. But.
Well, they also, on the spot pricing, they came out because, I would put in these high spot price bids, and so they've capped the spot pricing at, 4 times the actual, or it's like, it's about 4 times the actual instance cost.
Is that like recent? Because I've seen some stuff running at $30 an hour.
No, they put caps on spot price bids now, and you cannot. Yeah, I mean, you just in order to keep the instance up. So I mean, you should try to outbid the spikes and spots. And so they put a policy out there these days that you cannot, like a medium instance, you cannot put a bid in over, or at least this is in some of the West regions, you can't put a bid in over than 42 cents an hour. Where a medium instance is usually 12 cents an hour, I think. Yeah, you can't put in a bid over that these days. But then again, I mean, with spot pricing, you can get a spot price for a medium instance a lot of times at a penny an hour until the demand really increases, and then you'll shoot up to $5 an hour. But if you put that bid in for $5, I mean, you'll pay that for less than an hour, or for maybe 1 hour, and it all evens out. You can't do that anymore, though. You got on the bandwagon too late. So we'll wait for this to spin up. You can see we've already gotten our launch config started. Now we're showing our web server group. This needs to be a little more Ajax based, so it can refresh by itself.
The stack list does, but not the events.
The stack list? Oh yeah. The events. And our web server group is going. Now we got our scale up and scale down policies. And now we have our create complete. So now we should be able to go back to our outputs. And although, remember, it's going to take it a little bit of time from the load balancer to actually register the instance once again. See, now we have 2 instances because we put a minimum, if we go, as these are registering, if we go back to the template for a second. Where are you? Here, right here. So in our web server group, we put a minimum size of 2. a maximum size of 10 and our desired capacity of 2. So when we spin up right here, we're gonna have that desired capacity. I could terminate one after they get registered, and it'll then, after a minute, after the health check, then spin another one back up and make sure we always have that min size of 2. I could put a lot of load on them, and once the CPU gets threshed for 10 minutes, then start spinning up until it hits that max capacity of 10, or a max size of 10. And those can be changed, and those items can actually be parameterized depending on what your application needs. Let's go check to see, have they been registered yet? They're both in service. Do we have our, and there's our load balance instance. And that's the end of my demo and talk. If people have questions, plus I said, if you brought your own templates and need troubleshooting, I'm more than happy to help you. Thank you very much.